All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome to Mars, Atlantis, and the Hollow Earth, part 8.2. This is where we finished off the last time. So we've got the water vapor. The tendency of such snake initiates was to be secretive. Initiations into these clans include being covered off and bitten by live snakes. Count me out. Credo Mutwa describes how the Earth was once encircled by a canopy of water vapor, destroyed in a cataclysm. I've heard this before, by the way. This water vapor protected the planet from the harsh effects of the sun, and the whole planet was moist and humid and had a constant temperature. It was a place of enormous abundance and vast forests. This is a common description of the Golden Age, and this is similar to what you read with Troy McLaughlin, with the Saturn Death Cult and the Purple Dawn and all that. Check that out on YouTube. You can also see interviews with Troy McLaughlin as well. Very fascinating stuff. We'll get to that in the future. But he says that when Chitahuri destroyed this canopy, the whole climate changed and began to form the deserts. The Sahara Desert was once a green and pleasant land. This could explain the water erosion found on the Sphinx. The Hopi say that a mockingbird arrived to confuse their language. Stories of dragons. So Africa claimed descent from the same gods as the white peoples and others across the world. In Britain and the rest of Europe, the stories of dragons abound also. Here are just some of the places in the British Isles that have dragon or serpent legends. Avebury, Bamborough, Baslow, no idea. Bishop Auckland, Brent serving the dragon, rather obvious. The past Pelham, Brett Fortin, Brinsop, Bromfield, Burres, Burley, Castle, Neroche, Cawthorne, Chipping Norton, Crowcombe, Dartford, Deerhurst, Dinas, Emerus, sounds like it's out of Lord of the Rings, Dronley, Dunstanborough, Durham, Gunnerton, Henham, Highclere, Horsham, Hewenden, Hutton, Rugby, Kellington, Cairmore, Clive, Kingston, Kiwanik, Linton, no idea, no idea, London, Longwitton, Ludham, Lyminster, Middlewich, Mortiford, Norton, Fitzwarren, Norwich, Nunnington, Oxford, no idea, Penshaw, Renwick, Saffron, Walden, St Leonard's, Forest, Shervage Wood, Slingsby, Sockborough, Tanfield, Trull, Uppington, Wells. Wells, that stands out. Wasn't that where they shot the movie Hot Fuzz? I think it was. Anyway, that's maybe subject for another time, but interesting movie. Westbury, Wharncliffe, Wherewell, no idea, Wormbridge, Wormingford, Wormhill, and Wormshill. Yeah, Wells, that stands out in my head for some reason. I think that's where Hot Fuzz was shot. And there on the right-hand side, you see the Blue Dragon, and that's up in the Lawn Market in Edinburgh, just off the Writers' Close and the Macker's Court and all that. No, it's not the Writers' Close, it's the Writers' Museum, I beg your pardon. The Writers' Museum, and it's the Macker's Close or the Macker's Courtyard, something along those lines. And very interesting because the Writers' Museum features Robert Burns, Robert Louis Stevenson, and Walter Scott. And when you look into the biographies of those three men, I mean, the Scott Monument has gargoyles and things like that on it on Princess Street. So this recurring dragon symbol. And then you got the Writers' Museum dedicated to these three, shall we say, interesting characters. Go into that in the future, but look into them, especially Walter Scott. So Atlantean peoples, all the legends of the dragons follow similar themes. The British Isles was an Atlantean Lemurian colony. The carriers of the Atlantean Lemurian knowledge in Britain and other parts of Europe were called the Nadred or Adders, a Welsh name for serpents. They are better known as the Druids, a Gaelic word meaning serpent. An Irish manuscript claims that the adepts of the Druidic arts descended from the Tuatha De Danann. I wouldn't be surprised. Also called the Sumer. By the way, go on to Unslaved and look up the occult history of Ireland and the Irish origins of civilization by Michael Tazarian. Very interesting stuff. These were the former Atlantean peoples who settled in Asia Minor, Turkey, and into Europe. It was they who called Britain Albion after Albina, the eldest daughter of Danos, an ancient Danaan priest. The legend goes that when the Danaans were defeated by the later Greek Milesians, the peace agreement involved the Danaans moving from the surface to live in an underground, accessed from hollow hills in Ireland. And those legends about fairies and all that, you think it's all cute and all funny and all this, the leprechauns on the cereal box. They're real legends or anything but funny. They're fucking scary. It's nightmare fuel when you really go into the Irish legends and things like that. Like I say, go on to Michael Tazarian's websites, purchase his books and read them, which I have. I've had the honor of talking to him a few times on Unslaved, though I had a falling out with David Whitehead. I've covered that before. Michael doesn't return my emails these days, though I can't blame him really, because you have to stick by your co-host, I don't hold it against him really. And I don't have anything bad to say about Michael. He might have something bad to say about me, on the other hand, but that's neither here nor there. The quality of the man's work is still, very, very good. I still recommend looking into it. But also this ties into the whole Hollow Earth thing, I would say. Very much so. The whole idea of these, even H.G. Wells with the Time Machine, the Morlocks and the Eloi.
You ever see that movie, The Time Machine?
No. It's the land of the future, right? There's only two kinds of people in the world now. The Morlocks and the Eloi.
Okay.
The Elois, they live above ground. They wear togas. They're all blonde. They eat grapes and shit like that. But it's like the Garden of Eden there. I mean...
Basically, everybody just lays around, listens to harp music.
How do I get my boy back?
The Morlocks.
They live underground, right? Big, hairy, ugly suckers like you wouldn't wish on an ape, right? They're down there with all this machinery.
They're doing all the labor. They're making sure that the Elois have enough food and togas.
Are you going to answer me?
So this is a
great deal if you're an Eloi, right? There's only one thing. Every once in a while, a Morlock comes up to the surface and snatches an Eloi. Takes him down there.
All right, I'm done driving till you tell me what I want to know.
The Morlocks, they don't eat grapes. They're cannibals. They eat Elois.
So when I think about the Time Machine, it kind of reminds me of New York City, you know? See, you're an Eloi.
You and all your friends walking around like zombies with no fucking idea of the shit going on down below.
But look up Can-Am Missing Project with Dave Paulides and the Missing 411 series on YouTube, which is a brilliant trilogy of documentaries. You could argue either way that they're movies or documentaries, but to my mind, they're documentaries all about, missing people. There's Missing 411, Missing 411, The Hunted, and Missing 411, The UFO Connection. And I've got all three and I've seen all three and I recommend them. So anyway, the underworld. The same was said in Ireland of the Firbolgs, the Fomorians and Nemedians, who were also defeated and driven underground, where they lost their giant statue. This theme of giants forced underground where they dwindled in height can be found all over the world, and like the Danaans, they are often described as having the Nordic appearance. Another common story is that these people abducted surface humans, the Time Machine, and interbred with them. Michael Mott in Caverns, Cauldrons and Concealed Creatures points out the close similarity of Tuatha and Tuat, the Egyptian name for the underworld. The Druids continued to use their Danaan knowledge. They were located on islands because land surrounded by water is a particularly powerful energy center. And I think in the previous slides, we talked about that, like the Motte and Bailey castles of the Normans and things like that. People of the Serpent. So the first settlers of the Yucatan in Mexico were the Chanes, or people of the Serpent. They were led by the god Itzamna, the place of the lizard. There have been reports of shape-shifting reptilians for thousands of years. In the Indus Valley, the Nagas were one example. James Churchward established that the Maya of Central America and the Nagas of Asia were the same former Lemurian people. Of course, obviously. Cats can see the fourth dimension, and this is why they react to something in what appears to us to be empty space. The same with babies before their psyche is closed down to manipulate our vibrational level of the planet, to keep us, in other words, in the third dimension. They needed to create a genetic spacesuit that they could occupy by creating bloodlines that fused their reptilian DNA. Nephilim offspring, so it is to retain this genetic structure that the Illuminati bloodlines have always interbred with each other. They are, in effect, putting themselves into these positions, or those positions, from the lower fourth dimension. This is the reason that the genealogy of those in the major seats of global power today can be traced back to the Anunnaki hybrids that rule Sumer, Egypt, and so on. The ancient book of Enoch, destined to, quote, afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth. The book of Enoch describes the behavior of the Nephilim offspring produced with human women, and they became pregnant and bore great giants. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. The earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. The Emerald Tablets. Back to the Emerald Tablets. So, quote, in the form of man moved they amongst us, but only to sights were they as are men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men, crept they into the councils, taking form that were like unto men, slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdoms, taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered, only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and rule in his place. This is a wonderful summary. Those who dabble in the occult open themselves to manipulation by the lower fourth dimension, that home for demons and evil spirits. When we are consumed by fear, we are much easier to control. A couple of things to say there. Watch the movie They Live. Really good movie with Roddy Piper when he puts on the sunglasses and he can see things differently. Let's just say, I don't want to spoil it, but also TV shows like The Outer Limit go into things like this, or maybe even The Twilight Zone. I don't know. I haven't seen The Twilight Zone, but The Outer Limit has episodes which are kind of along these lines, kind of thing, you know. And also, like, not just the occult, but when you dabble in things like spirits, whiskey or vodka or anything like that. Why do you think they're called spirits? Because they open you up to spirits. That's the reason for the name in the first place. And when you dabble in drugs like hallucinogenics and things like that, like LSD and acid, and you talk about having a bad trip, stuff like tarot cards, Ouija boards, stay the fuck away from them, man. I'm not kidding. Stay the fuck away from that shit. Honestly, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Interdimensional portals. So fear connects us to them and feeds them energy. Quote, in ages past were they conquered by the masters, driven below to the place whence they came. But some there were who remained and hidden in spaces and places unknown to man. Still places like that in the world today, undiscovered places, or places that are largely left completely alone. Live they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. Out of the great deep were they called by the wisdom of Earthman, called for the purpose of gaining great power. Some researchers suggest that this reptilian faction was banished from the Earth in the far distant past by closing the interdimensional portals. These portals are points on the Earth's energy grid where the dimensions can connect. The place is held most sacred by the ancients. One major portal appears to be in the Caucasus Mountains. Yeah, I would definitely say so, from what I've read. Ladies of the Lake, I've been told many times that the DNA carried by the female in the reptilian bloodlines is the most important to them, and the symbolism of the goddess and the serpent have been linked since ancient times. The theme of the dragon queens even, goes back to the founding mother of the Anunnaki. These queens were represented as mermaids and were often called ladies of the lake. Throughout the lands settled by the former Atlantean Lemurian peoples, you find the worship of the serpent goddess and her serpent son, often symbolized as a bull. Interesting. Think about Wall Street and London and places like that, where you got the bull statues and all this. James Churchward reveals from ancient tablets and artwork that Lemurians worshipped the goddess called Queen Mu. and that Lemuria Mu was called the motherland. Around the Mediterranean, the priest kings were known as the children of the serpent goddess. Also wonder if in India, that's why the cow is sacred, or like the bull is sacred. Probably has a lot to do with this, but that's speculation on my end. So the Crete labyrinth, so house of the serpent goddess. So this emphasis on the dog in Hecate myth could connect her symbolically to the dog star Sirius, a base for the reptilians. Well, Sirius comes up all the time, again and again and again. That's the true sun that they're worshipping. It's not the sun in the sky that we know, it's actually Sirius, more often than not. In Colchis, that ancient Egyptian settlement at the foot of the Caucasus Mountains, there was a cemetery sacred to Hecate. Jason of the Argonauts legends was said to have offered a sacrifice to Hecate at Colchis. The name Hecate literally means 100. Both Sirius B and C take 50 years to orbit Sirius A, and the symbolism of 100, the dual orbit of the twins, was often used as code for the Sirius system. It is also important to note that, as Temple points out, I think he means Robert Temple, the ancient Egyptian word and hieroglyph for goddess also means serpent. The Minoan civilization on Crete, part of the Sumer Empire, was another serpent bull culture. Ancient Crete was famous for its labyrinth, a word meaning house of the serpent goddess. The Chaldees, St. Andrew. The story of a battle between the Nordics and a reptilian force for control of the planet is told in some considerable detail in the Edda. The emphasis by the serpent cult on the female is also confirmed. The Edda text was found in Iceland in the 12th century and was believed by scholars to be of Icelandic and Scandinavian origin. Waddell reveals in his book, British Edda, that it is actually written in Old Britain, a language closely linked to Old English, Anglo-Saxon, and Eastern Gothic. And Gothic came from the Sumerian, which came from Atlantis, Lemuria. The Edda is British. It was taken to Iceland by settlers from Scotland, Orkney, the Hebrides, and North Britain. Among them were the Chaldees, who had their headquarters at St. Andrews in Scotland. The Chaldees came from Chaldees, a people who followed the Sumer Empire. Osiris, Thor, Indara. Waddell presents more than 100 seals and sculptures from Sumer and the Hittites that portray scenes described in the British Edda. He says he could have published 300. No doubt about it. King Thor or Arthur. I think Arthur just means King Thor. But anyway, when you break down the word Arthur, I think it's just Arthur. I think it's actually two words that have been kind of put together. Anyway, well, not two words, but you get what I mean. So Arthur were other names for the first historical Sumerian king, Indara. And I think that's where you get the name India from. Sounds very much like it. Later renditions of the King Arthur story lost these connections and became an invented, though highly symbolic, fable. In Egypt, Indara, or Thor, was known by the title of Asari, which became Osiris, the leading deity in the Egyptian worship of the sun. Though you do have to question which sun. Do you mean that sun or Sirius? Probably Sirius. Osiris was often depicted as a blue-eyed Aryan, just as Indra was. King Indra, Dur or Tur of Sumer, Indra of India, Thor or Indri or Anvara, Andrew of the Edda, Osiris of Egypt, and King Arthur are all the same person. So is Dardanos, the first king of Troy in Homer's Iliad. Thor was known as Dan, and from this same root you get Danube and Denmark or Denmark. The name relates to the Danans who originated in Atlantis, land of the lions. So this, they claim, led to the names Danube and Denmark, and therefore makes the British and their genetic kin God's chosen people. The Edda says that Thor, Dan, and his Aryans went from Europe to settle in Turkey and Mesopotamia and found the civilization of Sumer. I don't know why I said it like that. Of Sumer, excuse me. It also says that the Aryans of the Danube Valley were already well in advance of the rest of the world before they went down to Mesopotamia. The Edda says that Thor defeated the serpent worshippers of Phrygia in Turkey. quote, land of the lions. Thor is depicted on ancient carvings symbolically fighting lions in this battle with the Phrygians, the symbolic Hebrew story of Daniel taming the lion. Thor was also Midas, the king who turned everything into gold. The Sun Cross or Red Cross. So the Sun Cross or the Red Cross was found drawn in red pigment in the alleged tomb of the Sumerian Egyptian Emperor Menes. What else says? This is the same symbol that became the Cross of St. George and later the flag of England after Sumerian Phoenicians settled there. The red sun cross is also the symbol of the Knights Templar. The splayed cross, known as a Maltese cross, so beloved of British royalty, was also found depicted in caves within the same Sumer Empire. The Edda tells the story of how Thor Indara fought with the serpent cult. The text equates St. George, the dragon slayer of Cappadocia, Turkey, with Thor, who was also a dragon slayer. And again, we see the theme of the Nordics are Aryans in conflict with the serpent people. There were three main leaders of this serpent cult. So Thor Indara versus the serpent. So Columba, Columbine, and the symbol of the dove are all other names and symbols for El, the serpent, queen of the Edda. The underground hell is supposed to be the place of judgment and eternal punishment where evil spirits dwell beneath the earth. Again, Hollow Earth. Scene 1 in the Edda portrays a world awash with violence. Scene 2 sees the arrival of the great reformer, the tall red-bearded Indri, who brought civilization. I feel the Edda accounts include symbolic as well as literal accounts, and some originated in Lemuria. Adam, as Thor Indara, fought the serpent cult of the Edenites. Waddell's translation of the Edda tells of how Thor, the dragon slayer, established his capital in Cappadocia under the name St. George of the Red Cross, later of England. And check out all the myths there on the right-hand side, the supreme thunder and sky god and some Indo-European mythologies. So I'm going to leave it there for 8.2 because I don't like to go too long. Thank you very much for listening, and feel free to leave your thoughts and comments down below. See you for 8.3.